The gunshots echoed across the plains as Vivian Taylor clutched her blood-stained dress, stumbling through the tall grass with nothing but the moon to guide her way. Behind her lay the remnants of her old life, a past soaked in betrayal and violence that no one in these parts would ever understand, let alone forgive. Ahead, only uncertainty and the dim glow of a lone ranch house on the horizon offered any hope of salvation. Elijah Monroe lowered his rifle at the sight of the woman approaching his property. It was 1879, and the Nebraska Territory was no place for a lady to be wandering alone, especially not one whose elegant dress, despite the dirt and what appeared to be blood, marked her as someone from society rather than the frontier. The rancher squinted through the darkness, his weathered face a mask of suspicion as he stepped off his porch and into the cool spring night. "That's far enough, madam," he called out, his voice firm but not unkind. "State your business." Vivian froze, her legs threatening to give way beneath her. For 3 days she had been running, hiding, scrounging for food, and now, face to face with a man holding a rifle, she found herself unable to fabricate yet another lie. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking from thirst. "I need help." Those simple words were all she managed before collapsing to the ground, the world around her fading to black. When Vivian awoke, she found herself in an unfamiliar bed, clean bandages wrapped around her wounded arm. The room was sparsely furnished but tidy, with a hand-carved wooden chair beside the bed and calico curtains fluttering in the breeze from an open window. For a moment, panic seized her until she remembered the kind eyes of the man who had found her. "You're awake," came a deep voice from the doorway. Elijah stepped into the room carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of stew and a cup of coffee. "Thought you might need something to eat." Vivian tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in her arm. "How long have I been here?" 2 days, Elijah replied, setting the tray down on a small table. "That's a nasty wound you got there. Bullet grazed you pretty good. Want to tell me how a lady like yourself ends up shot and running through my property in the middle of the night?" Vivian looked away, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the coffee. "I'd rather not say." Elijah studied her for a long moment. At 34, he'd seen enough of life to recognize when someone was running from something or someone. The woman before him couldn't be more than 25, with auburn hair and eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "Well," he finally said, "I reckon you'll tell me when you're ready. Until then, you're welcome to stay here and heal up." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I'm Elijah Monroe, by the way. Most folks just call me Ellie." "Vivian," she offered hesitantly. "Vivian Taylor." "Well, Miss Taylor, rest up. We can figure out what comes next when you're stronger." Over the next week, Vivian slowly regained her strength. Elijah asked no further questions about her past, though she could see the curiosity in his eyes. Instead, he brought her books from his modest collection, told her stories about his ranch and the surrounding area, and made sure she had everything she needed. One evening, as Vivian sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Elijah joined her with 2 cups of coffee. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he remarked, handing her a cup. "That's why I settled here. Every evening, God puts on a show just for those willing to stop and look." Vivian accepted the coffee gratefully. "It's magnificent. I've never seen anything like it." "City girl, then," she nodded, taking a sip. "St. Louis, long way from home." A shadow crossed her face. "I don't have a home anymore." Elijah leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Everyone's got a past, Miss Taylor. Out here, most folks are looking to start fresh. Nobody asks too many questions." "Some pasts can't be outrun," she replied softly. "Maybe not," he agreed. "But they can be faced." He turned to look at her, his expression gentle. "Whatever you're running from, you're safe here for as long as you need." The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to Vivian's eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her genuine kindness without expecting something in return. "Thank you," she whispered, quickly wiping away a tear. As the days passed, Vivian began to help around the ranch, first with small tasks inside the house, then venturing out to assist with the chickens and vegetable garden. Her wounded arm healed slowly, leaving a scar that would forever remind her of that desperate night. Elijah watched her with growing admiration. Despite her obvious upbringing as a lady of refinement, she tackled each new task with determination, never complaining about the hard work or simple conditions. One morning, as Vivian was gathering eggs from the henhouse, she heard the sound of approaching horses. Panic seized her, and she quickly ducked behind the structure, peering cautiously around the corner to see two men riding up to the main house. Elijah emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag as he greeted the visitors. From her hiding place, Vivian could hear snippets of conversation. "Looking for a woman," one of the men was saying. "Auburn hair, green eyes, might be injured." Vivian's heart pounded so loudly she feared they might hear it. They had found her. They were going to take her back. "Haven't seen anyone fitting that description," Elijah replied evenly. "Not many folks pass through here, mostly just my ranch hands, and they're all out with the herd right now." "Mind if we look around?" the second man asked, his tone suggesting it wasn't really a question. "Actually, I do mind," Elijah said, his stance shifting subtly as his hand moved closer to the revolver on his hip. "This is private property. If you boys are looking for someone, I suggest you try Willow Creek. It's about 20 miles east of here. They've got a sheriff who might be able to help you." The men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options against the determined rancher before them. "All right," the first one finally said. "But if you do see her, there's a reward. She's wanted for murder back in Missouri." Vivian closed her eyes, the familiar shame washing over her. Murder, that's what they were calling it. After the men rode off, Elijah found her still crouched behind the henhouse, shaking. "They're gone," he said quietly, kneeling beside her. "You're safe." Vivian looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and resignation. "You heard what they said. They think I'm a murderer." "I heard," he nodded, "and I think there's more to the story than what those men were saying." He held out his hand to help her up. "Come on, I think it's time you told me what happened." Inside the house, seated at the kitchen table with cups of hot tea before them, Vivian finally shared her story. "I was married to Victor Taylor, a businessman from St. Louis," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "To the world, he was charming, successful, respected. Behind closed doors, he was different." Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. "For 5 years, I endured his cruelty, his rages. I covered bruises with powder and smiled at parties while breaking inside." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. 3 weeks ago, he came home drunk and angrier than I'd ever seen him. He accused me of improprieties with a business associate of his. It wasn't true, but the truth didn't matter to Victor. He beat me worse than ever before." Vivian's voice faltered. "He said he was going to kill me. He had a gun. We struggled, and somehow, the gun went off." She looked up at Elijah, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I didn't mean to kill him. I was just trying to stop him from killing me. But his family, they're powerful people. They said I murdered him in cold blood to inherit his fortune. No one would believe my word against theirs." Elijah reached across the table and gently took her trembling hand in his. "I believe you, Vivian." Those 4 simple words broke something inside her, and tears flowed freely down her cheeks. For the first time since that terrible night, someone believed her. "Those men," she said through her tears, "they're probably bounty hunters hired by Victor's family. They won't stop looking for me." "Maybe not," Elijah agreed, "but they won't find you here. This is my land, and I protect what's mine." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're safe now." As summer bloomed across the prairie, Vivian gradually settled into life on the ranch. Elijah taught her to ride, first on an old, gentle mare named Daisy, then eventually on a spirited chestnut gelding she came to love. She learned to mend fences, help with the cattle, and cook over an open fire when they worked far from the house. The ranch hands, initially wary of the mysterious woman their boss had taken in, soon accepted her presence, impressed by her willingness to work and learn. Only Elijah knew her full story, though rumors inevitably circulated in the small community. One Sunday in late July, Elijah suggested they attend the small church service in town. Vivian hesitated, fear of being recognized still lingering in her mind. Folks around here mind their own business, he assured her. Besides, you can't hide forever. Sooner or later, you need to start living again. Reluctantly, she agreed. Wearing her best dress, one Elijah had purchased from the general store in town, Vivian sat beside him in the simple wooden church as the preacher spoke of forgiveness and redemption. After the service, several of the local women approached, curious about the newcomer. Vivian tensed, preparing for questions she couldn't answer, but to her surprise, they simply welcomed her to the community and invited her to the next quilting circle. As they walked back to Elijah's wagon, an older woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair stopped them. "You must be Miss Taylor," she said, smiling warmly. "I'm Martha Jenkins. My husband and I have the farm adjacent to Ellie's property. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Jenkins," Vivian replied, the social graces of her former life returning automatically. "Ellie hasn't brought a lady to church in all the years I've known him," Martha continued, her eyes twinkling. "You must be special indeed." Vivian felt a blush creep into her cheeks as Elijah cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Miss Taylor is my guest, Martha. She's recovering from some troubles back east." "Of course, dear," Martha patted Vivian's arm. "We all have our stories. What matters is where the Lord leads us next." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And I must say, he couldn't have led you to a better man than Elijah Monroe, stubborn as the day is long, but with a heart as big as the territory." On the ride back to the ranch, a comfortable silence stretched between them until Elijah finally spoke. "Sorry about Martha. She means well, but she's been trying to marry me off to every available woman within 50 miles for years." Vivian laughed softly. "She seems lovely, they all do. I didn't expect such a warm welcome." "Told you," Elijah smiled. "Good folks out here. They understand that everyone deserves a second chance." As the wagon rolled along the dusty road, Vivian found herself studying Elijah's profile, the strong jaw, the lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled, the way the sun brought out the gold in his brown hair. For the first time since arriving at his ranch, she allowed herself to acknowledge the warmth that spread through her whenever he was near. But such thoughts were dangerous. Her past still loomed behind her, and the last thing she wanted was to bring trouble to this good man who had risked so much to help her. That night, after a simple supper, they sat on the porch as had become their custom, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. A cool breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and promised relief from the day's heat. "Why did you help me that night?" Vivian asked suddenly. "You could have turned me away, most people would have." Elijah considered the question, rocking slowly in his chair. "My ma used to say that sometimes God puts people in our path for a reason. When I saw you stumbling toward my house that night, something told me you were sent here for a purpose." "What purpose?" he shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe to teach this stubborn old cowboy that there's more to life than cattle and crops." Vivian returned his smile, touched by his words. "I'm hardly an expert on life. I've made nothing but mistakes." "I don't believe that," Elijah said softly. "Whatever happened in your past, whatever choices you made, they led you here. And I, for one, am grateful for that." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and for a breathless moment, Vivian felt as though something important was about to happen. Then a coyote howled in the distance, breaking the spell, and Elijah stood up. "It's getting late," he said, his voice slightly rough. "We've got an early start tomorrow. The cattle need moving to the north pasture." Vivian nodded, both disappointed and relieved. "Good night, Ellie." "Good night, Vivian." As August gave way to September, the days grew shorter and the work more urgent as they prepared for the coming winter. Vivian threw herself into the tasks at hand, grateful for the physical exertion that left her too tired to dwell on the past or worry about the future. One afternoon, as she was hanging laundry to dry, the sound of approaching horses once again sent her heart racing. Shading her eyes against the sun, she saw Elijah riding in with 3 other men, his regular ranch hands returning from a trip to town for supplies. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by shame at her own fear. Would she ever be able to hear approaching riders without panicking? Would she ever truly be free of the past? Elijah noticed her distress as he dismounted, handing the reins to one of the men before walking over to her. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. Vivian nodded, forcing a smile. "Just jumpy, I suppose. I heard the horses and thought." "I understand," he said, his eyes kind. "But you should know something, Vivian, those bounty hunters who came by a few months back. Word in town is they've moved on to California. Apparently they decided you must have headed west." Hope flared in her chest. "Truly?" "That's what Sheriff Patterson says. He heard it from a stage driver who came through from Kansas City." Elijah hesitated, then added, "There's something else. The newspaper from St. Louis had an article about your husband's death. Seems a maid came forward, testified about the abuse. The reward for your capture has been withdrawn." Vivian stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "Are you saying they know the truth?" "Looks that way," he nodded. "You're not a wanted woman anymore, Vivian." The basket of laundry fell from her hands as her knees gave way. Elijah caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms supporting her as sobs of relief racked her body. "It's over," she whispered against his chest. "It's really over." "Yes," he murmured, his hand gently stroking her hair. "You're free now." That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Vivian finally allowed herself to consider what this news meant for her future. For months, she had lived in a strange limbo, neither fully present in her new life nor able to escape her old one. Now, unexpectedly, she had been granted a clean slate. "What will you do now?" Elijah asked, as if reading her thoughts. His tone was carefully neutral, but Vivian didn't miss the tension in his shoulders as he waited for her answer. "I don't know," she admitted. "I could go anywhere, I suppose, start over somewhere new." Elijah nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "You could. You're a capable woman, Vivian, stronger than you know. You'd make a good life wherever you chose to go." Something in his voice made her heart ache. "Are you wanting me to leave?" His head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise. "No, God, no, that's not what I meant at all." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking uncertain. I don't want you to feel obligated to stay here just because I helped you. You have choices now." Vivian studied him for a long moment, seeing beyond the confident rancher to the man beneath a man who, she realized with startling clarity, was afraid of losing her. "What if staying is what I want?" she asked softly. The hope that flared in his eyes took her breath away. "Is it?" Instead of answering directly, she rose from her chair and moved to kneel beside his, placing her hand tentatively on his arm. "These past months, you've shown me nothing but kindness and respect. You gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go, believed me when no one else would, taught me to be strong again." Her voice wavered slightly. "How could I want to be anywhere else?" Elijah's hand covered hers, warm and calloused from years of hard work. "When I found you that night, half dead on my property, I thought I was helping you," he said quietly. "But the truth is, Vivian, you saved me too. This ranch, this life, it was lonely before you came. I just didn't realize how lonely until you were here." He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know it hasn't been long, and maybe this is too soon, but I need you to know that I care for you, deeply, more than I thought possible." Vivian leaned into his touch, her heart racing. "I care for you too, Ellie. So much that it frightens me sometimes." "Why does it frighten you?" "Because I've made such terrible mistakes before. I trusted the wrong man once, and it nearly destroyed me." Elijah nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm not asking for promises, Vivian, just a chance. A chance to show you that not all men are like your husband, that love doesn't have to hurt." The word love hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging it directly but both feeling its weight. "I'd like that chance," Vivian whispered. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Elijah leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss that spoke of patience, respect, and deep affection. When they parted, Vivian felt as though something fundamental had shifted inside her, fear giving way to hope, pain to possibility. As autumn painted the prairie in golds and russets, Vivian and Elijah's relationship deepened. They moved cautiously, both aware of the wounds Vivian still carried and the trust that needed to be rebuilt. Elijah never pushed, always allowing her to set the pace, and in his patience, Vivian found healing. Word spread quickly through the small community that Elijah Monroe had finally found himself a woman. The local ladies, led by Martha Jenkins, took Vivian under their wing, sharing recipes, quilting techniques, and the unwritten rules of frontier life. For the first time since she was a young girl, Vivian felt part of something genuine, a community built on mutual support rather than the shallow social connections of her past life. One crisp October morning, Elijah announced that he needed to ride into town for supplies. "Would you like to come along?" he asked over breakfast. "Martha mentioned there's a harvest social at the church tomorrow evening. We could stay overnight at the hotel, attend the social, then head back the next day." Vivian hesitated. She had ventured into town a few times since that first church service, but always briefly and with Elijah close by. The idea of a social gathering with dancing and conversation brought back memories of the society events she'd once attended in St. Louis, events that invariably ended with Victor's rage once they returned home. Sensing her unease, Elijah reached across the table and took her hand. "We don't have to go if you're not comfortable. It was just a thought." Vivian looked into his kind eyes and made a decision. She couldn't let her past dictate her future forever. "No, I'd like to go. It sounds lovely." The smile that lit up his face was worth any lingering anxiety she felt. They arrived in town that afternoon, securing a room at the small hotel before visiting the general store for supplies. As Elijah discussed feed prices with the proprietor, Vivian browsed the fabric section, thinking she might make new curtains for the kitchen. Vivian Taylor, is that you?" The voice from behind her sent ice through her veins. Slowly, she turned to face a well-dressed woman in her 40s, her face vaguely familiar. "I'm sorry, you must be mistaking me for someone else," Vivian replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman frowned, studying her more closely. "No, I'm certain it's you. You're Victor Taylor's wife from St. Louis. I'm Alina Whitman. We met at the Richardsons' Christmas party 2 years ago." Vivian's mind raced. Alina Whitman, the wife of one of Victor's business associates, a woman known for her sharp eyes and sharper tongue. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, madam," Vivian insisted, her heart pounding. "My name is Vivian Monroe. I live on a ranch nearby with my husband." "Monroe," Alina repeated skeptically, "but you look exactly like, is there a problem here?" Elijah's deep voice interrupted as he appeared at Vivian's side, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. Alina's eyes darted between them, uncertainty crossing her features. No problem. I just thought I recognized your wife from somewhere." "My wife tends to have that kind of face," Elijah replied smoothly. "People are always thinking they know her from somewhere." He smiled, but his eyes remained watchful. "Vivian, we should get going if we want to make it to the Jenkinses for supper." With a polite nod to the confused Alina, Elijah guided Vivian out of the store and toward their wagon. "Who was that?" he asked quietly once they were out of earshot. "Someone from my past," Vivian replied, her voice shaking slightly. "Someone who knew Victor." Elijah's expression darkened. "Will she cause trouble?" "I don't know. She seemed uncertain when you called me your wife." Elijah stopped walking, turning to face her. "About that, I'm sorry if I overstepped. It just seemed the simplest explanation in the moment." Vivian managed a small smile despite her anxiety. "It's all right, it was quick thinking." They continued to the wagon in silence, but as Elijah helped her up to the seat, he paused. "You know, it wouldn't have to be a lie," he said quietly. Vivian stared at him, not quite comprehending. "What do you mean?" "Being my wife," he clarified, a flush creeping up his neck. "I know this isn't how I planned to ask, and it's probably too soon, but the words just sort of slipped out back there, and they felt right." "Illy," Vivian breathed, her heart racing for an entirely different reason now. "Are you proposing to me in the middle of the street?" He chuckled nervously. "I suppose I am. Not very romantic, is it?" "It's perfect," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "But are you sure? My past is behind you," he interrupted firmly. "I love you, Vivian. Not despite your past, but including it, because it made you who you are today, the strongest, most compassionate woman I've ever known." The simplicity and sincerity of his declaration broke through the last of her defenses. I love you too, Illy, more than I ever thought possible. Is that a yes? He asked, his eyes bright with hope. Yes, she nodded, laughing through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Elijah's face split into a wide grin as he lifted her down from the wagon and into his arms, spinning her around right there on the main street of town, oblivious to the curious onlookers. Illy, she protested, laughing. People are watching. Let them watch, he replied, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. Let the whole territory know that Elijah Monroe is the luckiest man alive because Vivian Taylor agreed to be his wife. Despite her joy, a shadow of worry still lurked in Vivian's mind. What about that woman? What if she tells someone who I really am? Elijah's expression grew serious. You're not a wanted woman anymore, remember? Even if she does recognize you, the truth about Victor is known now. Besides, he added with a reassuring smile, folks around here are protective of their own, and you, my love, are definitely one of us now. The harvest social the next evening was a blur of congratulations, music, and laughter. News of their engagement had spread through the small town like wildfire, and it seemed everyone wanted to wish them well. The women hugged Vivian and whispered advice about married life, while the men clapped Elijah on the back and teased him about finally being caught. As they danced beneath lanterns strung from the rafters of the church hall, Vivian felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. These people, farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers, had accepted her without question, embracing her as one of their community simply because Elijah had chosen her. "What are you thinking about?" Elijah asked as they swayed to a slow melody, his arm warm around her waist. "How different my life is now," she replied honestly. "A year ago, I was attending parties in St. Louis where everyone smiled to your face and gossiped behind your back. Now I'm dancing in a church hall in Nebraska territory, and I've never felt more at home." Elijah's eyes softened as he looked down at her. "That's because you are home, Vivian. You were always meant to be here. How can you be so sure?" "Because the moment I saw you stumbling toward my ranch that night, something inside me knew. I told Martha once that you were my gift from heaven, and I meant it. Sometimes God sends us exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it." Tears pricked at Vivian's eyes. "I think he sent me exactly what I needed too." They were married 2 weeks later in the same small church, with Martha Jenkins helping Vivian prepare and the entire community turning out to witness the ceremony. Vivian wore a simple ivory dress that Martha and the other women had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. As she walked down the aisle toward Elijah, Vivian thought of how far she had come from that desperate night when she had fled St. Louis with nothing but the clothes on her back and a bullet wound in her arm. Never could she have imagined then that her life would lead her here, to this moment, to this man. The preacher spoke of love, patience, and faith as they stood before him, hands joined and hearts full. When it came time for their vows, Elijah's voice rang clear and true. "Vivian, when you came into my life, I was existing, not living. My days were filled with work, my nights with loneliness. You brought light back into my world, reminded me what it means to care for someone more than myself. I vow to protect you, to respect you, to walk beside you through whatever life brings us. I promise to be patient when you need time, strong when you need support, and always, always honest. You are my gift from heaven, and I will cherish you all the days of my life." Tears streamed down Vivian's cheeks as she spoke her own vows. "Illy, you saved me in more ways than you know. You gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go, believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and showed me that love can be gentle and kind. I vow to stand by you in good times and bad, to build a life with you based on trust and respect, to never take for granted the precious gift we've found in each other. You are my heart, my home, my second chance, and I will love you until my last breath." As winter settled over the prairie, Elijah and Vivian settled into married life with a joy that warmed their home despite the biting cold outside. They worked side by side during the day, tending to the needs of the ranch, and spent evenings planning for the future, discussing improvements to the house, additional livestock they might acquire in spring, and in quiet moments by the fire, the possibility of children. One snowy evening in December, as they sat wrapped in a quilt before the hearth, Elijah broached a subject they had both been avoiding. "I was thinking," he began, his fingers idly playing with a strand of Vivian's hair, "about your name." She looked up at him, puzzled. "My name?" "Legally, you're still Vivian Taylor," he explained gently. "I know you've been using Monroe since we married, but if we want to make it official, we'd need to file paperwork, which would mean acknowledging your past." Vivian was silent for a long moment, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted. "About how long I can keep running from who I was." "You don't have to decide now," Elijah assured her. "I just wanted you to know that whatever you choose, I'm with you." She turned in his arms to face him, her expression resolute. "I don't want to hide anymore, Ellie. The truth about Victor is known now. I was defending myself, and I shouldn't have to live in fear because of it." Pride shone in Elijah's eyes. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she nodded. "I want to be Vivian Monroe in truth, not just in name. I want our children, when we have them, to have a mother who faces the world honestly, not one who's always looking over her shoulder." Elijah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then that's what we'll do. After the winter breaks, we'll ride to the territorial capital and make it official." When spring arrived, bringing with it new calves, fresh green grass, and the promise of renewal, Elijah and Vivian made the journey to file the necessary paperwork. To Vivian's relief, the process was straightforward, a testament to the changed circumstances back in St. Louis. With her legal status resolved and her name officially changed, she felt as though the last weight had been lifted from her shoulders. On the ride home, they stopped by a pristine stream for a midday meal. As they sat on a blanket beneath a budding cottonwood tree, Vivian gathered her courage to share the news she had been keeping for several weeks. "Illy," she began, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from the bread he was slicing, raising an eyebrow at her tone. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right," she assured him, reaching for his hand. "I've been to see Dr. Mitchell in town. We're going to have a baby." Elijah's knife clattered to the ground as he stared at her, momentarily speechless. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled nearby birds into flight, he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with such enthusiasm that they both tumbled back onto the blanket, laughing. "A baby," he repeated in wonder, his hand coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "When?" "Late October, the doctor thinks." Elijah's smile was radiant. "A harvest baby. How perfect." As they lay there, making plans and dreaming of the future, Vivian marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the darkest night of her life had come the greatest joy she had ever known: a loving husband, a home, a community, and now a child on the way. "What are you thinking?" Elijah asked. Noticing her contemplative expression, Vivian smiled, squeezing his hand. "I was just thinking about that night I stumbled onto your property, how terrified I was, how certain that my life was over. I never imagined then that I was actually running toward my future, not away from my past." Elijah's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Like I said, you were my gift from heaven, and now you're giving me another one." He placed his hand once more on her stomach, his touch reverent. "I couldn't ask for more." "Nor could I," Vivian agreed, her heart full to bursting. "Nor could I." Their daughter, Emma Grace Monroe, was born on a crisp October evening in 1880, with Martha Jenkins serving as midwife and Elijah pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the infant's first cry rang through the house. When Martha finally allowed him in, the sight of Vivian holding their tiny daughter rendered him speechless with awe. "She's perfect," he whispered, perching carefully on the edge of the bed and reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's downy head. "Just like her mother." Vivian smiled tiredly, the hours of labor forgotten in the joy of this moment. "Would you like to hold her?" With reverent care, Elijah took the swaddled infant in his arms, marveling at how something so small could fill his heart so completely. "Hello, Emma," he murmured. "I'm your pa. Your ma and I have been waiting for you for a long time." As Emma grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered under Elijah and Vivian's care. They added a new wing to the house, increased their herd, and planted an orchard that Elijah swore would one day produce the finest apples in the territory. Vivian started a small school in their home for the children of neighboring ranches, drawing on her education to ensure the next generation would have opportunities beyond the frontier. When Emma was 3, her brother Ethan William joined the family, completing their happiness in a way they hadn't known was possible. Watching her children play in the yard Vivian had planted with flowers, or sitting on Elijah's lap as he told them stories of cattle drives and frontier adventures, Vivian sometimes had to remind herself that this was real, that she had found not just safety, but love and fulfillment beyond anything she had dared to hope for. On the 5th anniversary of the night Vivian had stumbled onto Elijah's property, they stood together on the porch after putting the children to bed, watching the moon rise over the prairie just as it had done that fateful evening. 5 years, Elijah mused, his arm around Vivian's waist. Hard to believe so much has changed in such a short time. Not everything has changed, Vivian replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. You're still the same good man who took in a stranger that night, still my protector, my safe harbor. And you're still the bravest woman I've ever known, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Still my gift from heaven. As they stood there in the moonlight, surrounded by the life they had built together, Vivian offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the darkness that had led to light, the fear that had led to courage, and the end that had become the most beautiful beginning. For in the vast expanse of the Nebraska territory, on a ranch carved from wilderness by a man's determination and a woman's resilience, Vivian Monroe had found more than refuge. She had found redemption, purpose, and a love that had healed wounds she once thought would never mend. And in the years that followed, as their children grew strong and the community around them flourished, the story of how Elijah Monroe had taken in a wounded woman with a past no one would forgive became something of a legend in those parts, a testament to the power of second chances, the healing nature of love, and the truth that sometimes, in our darkest moments, we are indeed sent gifts from heaven that change the course of our lives forever.